Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Cited. This is Jesse, aka BGFH, and I am back for another hardware review video. You got a quick glimpse as I activated the phone here to record, but we are looking at a device that I got. It was a Kickstarter project from a little while back called the DreamCade Replay. I'm holding the box in my left hand here, and it is basically a very small retro console, retro console and arcade emulation box that is built off of a Windows 10 mini PC. So I know a lot of people are asking the question, like, why would why have something like this? You can do this with the computer that you have. You can get MAME, you can get RetroPie and get a Raspberry Pi, that kind of a thing. And yeah, you could do that. The specs on the machine aren't too bad for what it is. And for what I want it for, I think it actually works reasonably well, actually pretty well from what I've done so far. So, just taking a look at the box really quick. Just kind of got this really simple grid pattern. You got the DreamCade Replay. There's a picture of the box here. The sides, again, pretty blank. Got a few little items on the back here. Not, like I said, pretty bare minimum case. Nothing too bad there. Or box, but so let's shove that off to the side. And this little guy right here is the DreamCade Replay. So you see you got this little kind of, what is this, like a hexagon pattern or something like that? You see these little lines here. I like the little glowy blue. I like the little glowy blue pattern you got going on here, just around the bottom. So this is, I kind of have it at a weird angle here just because of the way I'm using it. On this side you got a little VGA port, so if you want to hook this up to a monitor, you can. On this, let's see, how do I want to do this? Around back here, you have a HDMI and a Ethernet port. I'm running it off of Wi-Fi right now. We have a power cord, and it looks like that might be, I'm not sure if that's another USB port or I'm not sure what that little port is right there. Not exactly sure. And let me pick it up here. On the right hand side, you've got basically 3 USB ports. You've got 2 USB 3 and 1 USB 2 port. You've got a headphone jack, which you can maybe see in there you go. You can kind of see it in the corner. And you got your power button there. So, like I said, it's a very... Let me set this... like I said, I'm still trying to do everything with this one-handed, so it's a little tricky. And that's really it. On the bottom, there is a little connector, which I didn't buy. And I sort of wish I did, but it doesn't really matter. There's a port, or there's like a little add-on that you can get, and it basically adds a little hard drive base. So then you can add a hard drive into the unit. But it does have, oh, I forgot, it does have the micro SD card slot on the side there with the USBs as well. So if I wanted to, I could expand it that way. And the thing is, the games that I'll be playing, they're small anyway. I mean, literally... Like Atari games you can fit on, you can probably fit all of them on a floppy disk almost. NES games are not very big. SNES games are not that big. Genesis aren't very that big. So, like I said, this emulates a lot of different consoles, and we'll get into that here very shortly when I show you the screen on the TV. But like I said, this is actually a Windows 10 mini PC. So, it's not a great spec machine. I forget exactly the processor speed, but it's a slower processor, and it has 4 gigabytes of memory. And I think, and it's got 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Now, I think some of that they have like this Windows 10 for like mini PCs, and I want to say there's some restriction, like you can't have more than 4 gigabytes of memory or something. There's some weird restrictions, like where if you have this certain license of Windows, you can't be above a certain spec. So the reason that I wanted this, and I thought it looked interesting, because they promised a little bit more, I think, than maybe they delivered in the end. But for what it is, and just something really quick and easy that I can plug into my PC or plug into my TV, it does exactly what I want. Because I've looked at MAME in the past. The problem is, like, you got to have certain versions of MAME, and only certain versions of MAME work with certain versions of this arcade ROM. And I don't like going out and looking for ROMs. I know it's still fairly easy to do, but again, anything I try to buy, and we'll get into that when I want to talk a little bit about emulation a little bit later, my thoughts on emulation. But like, if a game is made available through Steam or Nintendo or Xbox or something, and it's reasonable, yeah, I'll pick it up that way because it's still available. However, a lot of the games that I want to play or even try are not. So, there's kind of that gray area of, legal and moral gray area that people kind of refer to when they refer to emulation. Speaking about the console itself, let's take a look at the controller. This is the controller that came with mine. It's basically, it feels sort of like a cheaper Xbox game controller. I mean, the analog sticks don't feel too bad, really. The buttons are a little bit stiffer. You have an okay D-pad. I think hitting the buttons, everything feels maybe a little bit stiffer than they do on, let's say, an Xbox pad. But the cool thing is, I can hook up my Xbox One controller and use that if I want to, because you can go under the menus, and once it recognizes you, it may recognize your controller by default, or you can always go in and remap through the arcade interface here. You can remap what you want the buttons to be, and then you can have this. But so far I've just used the controller that came with it because I wanted to see what it was like. Now, this is a wireless controller. It does come with a cord where you can plug in it's like, I believe, a USB-C type of connector to it. And it comes with you have to be careful when you open it, because I almost lost it. I heard something rattling around in there. And there's this little tiny USB dongle that you plug in. And my controller was... Shut up, voiceover. My controller was paired up with the system when I got it. So that was nice. I just turned it on and it worked. So the way they have it set up too is that your left analog stick or your D-pad, if you want a little bit more fine control, can move the mouse, both within Windows and within the interface itself. So that I do appreciate. There is an on-screen keyboard, although, it's a Windows PC, so it also, it's got USB ports on it. Why not? Let's put, let's plug in, I plugged in an old keyboard with it, so just to do some of the initial setup, and some of the, initial searches that I would do for games. I should mention that, like I said, as a low vision user, once I plugged in a keyboard during the initial setup, I was able to turn narrator on and go through that. Worked beautifully. Now, they do tell you that you're also supposed to create a local account, so you don't want to sign in with your Microsoft ID. I don't know what it does necessarily if you do, but I followed their directions and said, okay, no, let's create a local account, and there you go. So once you get through the initial Windows setup, before you actually turn it on, you will want to look underneath and get your console's serial number or registration number, because once you start the DreamCade setup process, you will have to know that, and you will have to put that number in to do that. And I had to try mine several times because I read it, but I thought it was a little bit hard for me to tell. At first I thought there were some ones, and I wasn't sure if they were ones or I's. And then there were zeros, and I wasn't sure if they were O's. And I think the ones I had correct, but I think I actually ended up changing like a 1 or a 0 to an O, and then it finally went through. So I was kind of worried at first that I'm like, oh crap, I can't get this stupid thing registered or activated. But I did, and it was partially my error and sort of a visual error, kind of a mistake kind of a thing. So, I mean, that's the hardware itself. You know, you've got the unit. I mean, it's really no bigger than like an Apple TV. It might be a little thicker, but I mean, it's quiet. You can't hardly hear the thing. You really don't. You've got this. You've got the controller. You get an HDMI cable. You get the little dongle or the little wireless adapter for the controller. You get HDMI. You get your USB to charge the thing. And I'm not actually using its HDMI. I just unplugged my SNES Mini just to get it up and running quickly, and I'm just using that HDMI and plugged it right in there for now. So yeah, that's the hardware, and it kind of went to sleep because I wasn't using it for a while. Let's wake up my controller here, and then I'll show you a little bit of the interface. Now again, I'm not going to be able to show you the games necessarily. I can start by showing you like some splash screens and, you know, some, you know, the, what do you call it, the little footage where it's just the demo footage that they have. But I can't do it one-handed, holding the phone. So one thing I liked right away is once you get into this interface, I should also mention when I set it up originally, you go through the Windows setup, you do some Windows updates, and then you go through and you set this thing, you set up the DreamCade software. I did have some trouble. You can pick, there's a whole bunch of checkboxes, and I just selected all, but you're basically picking like which emulation aspects and features you want to install. And it would install most of them, but there are certain ones, and I'm not exactly sure which, but it hung on one of them. I tried it like 3-4 times, and eventually I just kind of, it seemed to install all the ones that I needed, so I'm not exactly which feature I may or may not have installed, but I did get the vast majority of it, and everything that I've tried so far, minus a couple bugs and one ROM that doesn't seem to work, everything that I've tried works. And you can also import ROMs within the software through this option right here, add new games, or if you have your own existing ROM library, there's a way to import them as well, but I haven't done that yet. So you may notice that my text here on the menu on the right here is ginormous. That is not by default. I was poking around settings, and the text is really like way over on the right hand side, and it was really small. But you can go all the way up to 300%, and for this video I jumped it way up to 300%, because that way you guys can easily see that you can get this text really large. And you know what, it does a little clipping, like if it's a really long name it might cut off a little bit, and it's mainly for the menu. If you're doing the searches and stuff, that will be a different size. So before I go to the consoles, let's show you the ROM interface. Or the search. So get new games, let's do that, and I'll show you what this looks like. And because this is a Windows 10 machine, I made some tweaks. So here is your on-screen keyboard that it uses. On the lower left hand side you've got like your different consoles that you can filter by, or your systems. You even have retro systems like the Apple II and Commodore 64. Haven't really played much with those yet. I've mainly been looking at console stuff. You got your search up there, and like I said, with being Windows, so I'm going to take my controller here, and I'm going to move it. You see I'm using the Windows Black extra large cursor. So I was able to, it does, once you're in this interface, it does lock you into it. Like it even disables the Windows key, but if you're an old school Windows user like I am, you remember that Control Escape, you can exit this interface if you want to, but if you remember that Control Escape will also bring up your start menu, that does work. And then I was able to change like my mouse size and color. So I'm just going to reach over to the left here. I'm going to look for the worst game ever because it's one-handed. And I can probably, if I can get my E.T. I don't know. It was just easy to type. Okay, so, well, I typed E.T., but, you know, this is kind of more the regular size. Oh, Tetris Plus 2. I've never played that. The hell system? Okay, and then so it tells you, okay, it tells you the arcade. So it tells you what system you're looking for. And if I use my right analog stick, I can just scroll down. And basically you just move your mouse over these. And if you want one of them, you just, it'll turn green and you say, yes, you want that. It gives you a little warning about, like, you know, you having to own the ROMs and stuff like that. I'll talk about that more later. And then you're given, it's kind of basically like a web page because it uses like the Internet Archive, I believe it is, to grab these games that are kind of just out there. And most of the time it works great. However, sometimes the one problem, especially as a low vision user that I have, is that when you do a search and you try to download something, what it does is you hit the button, and instead of giving you the link, you'll be given a stupid CAPTCHA. And it's one of those, not the letter number ones, but it's the ones where you say, I am not a robot. And then you click, like, it'll say, oh, pick all these images that have cars or street signs or buses or whatever. And I've had mixed luck getting that work. Sometimes if you just wait a little while and then come back, and then you won't have to do the CAPTCHA again. I tried doing the audio CAPTCHA, but it must be something with the way that the web page, or that the way this is interpreting the way that this system is set up, that for some reason it gives me a weird error and I can't seem to do the audio CAPTCHAs. So I have to do visual. So I either have to try to keep brute forcing it to try to solve some of these, or like I said, I wait a little while and then I come back and then I'm sometimes able to do that. So, I mean, your interface is pretty good, you know. I mean, I'm able to see, I mean, they have, when you're looking for a game, you can find all kinds of versions of the same game. Like if I looked up, let's say, Mortal Kombat, it would have the Super Nintendo, the arcade, the Sega Genesis, the Game Boy version. God forbid you'd ever want to play that. Actually, a friend of mine had the Game Boy version. It was really, really slow and really awful. But I can just go all the way up to and choose to quit this, or I can cheat and Alt F4. So I'm keeping my keyboard hooked up just for ease of use with the typing and getting in and out of certain things. So we're back to our interface here, and let's see, how do I want to hold this? So we've got our add games. We've got our cart. This is our cart app. I believe this is where you can import like your cartridges and stuff that you have. Stream games. I have not looked into that yet either. And then we get our systems. So we get our, we've got some 2600 here. You see a nice little TV and a picture of the old classic console. We have arcade. We have Dream Arcade. So that's some of the stuff that they have. We have Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color. What do we got here? Oh, GameCube. I haven't tried those yet. Media makes perfect sense. NES, Nintendo 64, Pico games, pinball. Yes, you can emulate pinball machines. PlayStation, retro PCs. So again, there's like your Apple II and stuff like that. Sega Genesis, Sega Master System, settings, SNES, TurboGrafx 16, and then we're back to add. Now, there is Dreamcast emulation on here as well, but I have not tried that because I think the latest I'm really going to go is maybe N64, maybe PlayStation. So the later games, like for PlayStation, N64, Dreamcast, especially since it did the PlayStation and Dreamcast, what I was genuinely hoping, some of the later games, they're just not there. Like, I would have loved to have Tekken 3 for the PlayStation. They have the arcade version, but remember Tekken 3 on the PlayStation where you had all those extra modes? You had like the weird like volleyball one, and you had the Tekken Force, which is like the 2D brawler sort of a thing. And I really wanted some of the early Tony Hawk. God, because remember how bad Tony Hawk 5 sucked. Remember how bad Tony Hawk HD sucked. I want a good Tony Hawk game, for the love of God. And they just don't seem to have them. So if I can, maybe I can try to find like a ROM of the PlayStation version of, let's say, Tony Hawk 1 and 2 would be great. Because I would play the hell out of that again. Even some of the newer arcade ports that I've tried a couple. Soul Blade or Soul Edge seemed to work okay. The predecessor to Soul Calibur. But some of the arcade games, they come in really quiet. They're very, very quiet for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Like, you'll emulate an older system or an older arcade game, and it's perfectly fine. But that one, and then Mortal Kombat 4, I just like, I got to see what Mortal Kombat 4 was like again. I have the N64 game. I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to see what the arcade version was like. And the problem with that one, I tried the arcade. That one has some really strange lag to it, where the audio echoes, like it echoes twice, and it doesn't play quite right. And like I said, the audio, it just has this weird sort of, it doubles up on everything, so it just looks and sounds really strange. But technically the ROM does work. If I went in and maybe try to fuss with the settings for that particular cabinet, maybe I could get it to run a little bit better. The only other, there was one other game. Was it it was the Genesis. It was Comic Zone. I could not get that to run. You would try to load the ROM, and I don't think the Comic Zone had any weird chips in it or anything. But it would not run that. It would run other Genesis games fine. And I'm not too crushed that Comic Zone isn't working, because that's available on pretty much every Sega flashback collection or Sega, whatever they call this generations. You got the Genesis arcade or Genesis classics, and every generation they call it something different. But I have it on like 3 different platforms again, so I don't really care. But I just thought it was weird that didn't work. I downloaded it just because, I own it, and because it was just one of my favorite. It was a really, really cool Sega game. So those are the main 2 emulation problems that I've seen so far, is like the weird Mortal Kombat thing and the Comic Zone. Otherwise, everything that I've tried, everything from like Atari to N64 has worked well. The only other problem is that there are, especially for some of the arcade stuff, the one thing I haven't figured out, let's just have it do an arcade so that you have something interesting to look at. Let's go to arcade, and I just hit the right arrow like I'm doing a tree view in Windows, and it goes to, okay, so I got Alien vs. Predator. That was a classic arcade game. Berserk, Intruder Alert. Crime Fighter, I remember playing that in our local bowling alley, and I wanted to try that beat 'em up again. What do we got here? Oh, that one does the same thing as the Mortal Kombat. That one, the audio and everything is really, really laggy and really messed up. I can't play that right now. Maybe I can kajigger it to try to work, but I haven't really looked into it too deeply. But yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that one doesn't work either. Gyrus, that game is really hard. Junior Pac-Man, Jungle Hunt, Moon Patrol, There's my Mortal Kombat 4, Mrs. Pac-Man. Narc, that was a cool game. I had that for the NES. NBA Jam Tournament Edition. That was like the only basketball game I ever really loved. Outrun, Sega Classic, Pac-Man. These are ones that I've personally downloaded. I wanted to try the arcade version of Pit Fighter because the Super Nintendo version just sucked hard. I remember thinking like, oh man, that looks so cool. I wanted to see it. I was at a friend's house and we rented it and like, oh, that game was terrible. And to be fair, the arcade version, it's a little bit smoother, but it's jank. It's still really... I think it came around right around the time that Mortal Kombat did, and their whole shtick was that they had these like digitized fighters, and then Mortal Kombat came out and just destroyed that game because it was so much better. Yep, the Punch-Out games from the arcade. Rampage, we got on here. RoboCop 1 and 2. I remember like any game back in the day, you would go see the NES version, and then you would go see the arcade version, and there was like way better graphics, and you had speech and like almost like movie footage kind of things. And I just remember that from being a kid. Like, you know, nowadays your console stuff is what you have, but like back then, you know, you'd see the arcade port, and then you would see the NES port or something, and it would be like, God, I mean, it's way inferior in a lot of cases. You had other cases where the arcade version, like Ninja Gaiden, was not that great, but then the NES version of Ninja Gaiden kicked all kinds of ass. But you know, you had all kinds of different things back then. Soul Edge, that's what I was talking about. The arcade. Yeah, Space Invaders, Strider, Super Punch-Out. The Punisher. There we go. This is what we want. Let's go watch the track for one of the most popular, widely available games ever. We'll back up a little bit here. Oh wait, please don't give me a copyright strike. If I get that, I'm going to be pissed. I just thought of that now. You know what? I better back out because it's more than like 10 seconds. So I hit Start Select, and then you're brought up to the menu, and I can... Some games have this option, some don't. Some you can save and quit, and then quit, and then some just pop you right out. Sometimes they don't even give you the option. So I'm not sure what causes that. And then there are certain settings, like I can change the arcade settings and stuff like that. Yeah, I totally forgot. Because one of the things I was going to talk about, the Simpsons game, that particular title, the character that you selected is based on what coin slot you put it in, or what control slot you use. So like the far left, I'm on controller 1. That would always be Marge. Let's see, then it was Homer, Bart, and Lisa was on the right. So I usually like to play Homer or Bart, but I havenent figured out how to like set the input to be different under arcade, to be like, no, I want to play as character, or I want to play as controller 2 so that I can play as Homer. That's the other thing I haven't quite figured out yet. But the emulation on that, I've played a little ways into that, and it worked fine. I've played, like I said, I haven't even played all these yet, but these are just ones that I remember, and just sort of wanted to check out. We got a little bit of WWF, what the heck is that one here? WWF, oh, okay, WrestleMania. So we got a few different things in there. Let's go... Oh, let's do Game Boy Advance. We got some good ones in there. Oh, yeah. So this... Anyway, so there we got our nice little Game Boy Advance over on the left. If the title is really long, they just make it really small. So we got Mario Pinball. I mean, I've done... Ninja 5-0. That one... I definitely do own, and that's actually kind of a rare cartridge right now, and thankfully I own the physical copy of that too. I've got the Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, Wario Land 4. So let's just go into this one, and I'll just, like I said, I'll just show you how quickly the GBA loads. Well, so there's your boot up. And I'm going to back out of it right away because Nintendo's the other one that loves to just, oh, can't have our stuff. You know, it's just stupid. But there you go. Let's see, let's load, yeah, you know what, let's load, like, Ninja 5.0 here. Just to have something to look at here. Ninja 5.0. Yay, Game Boy! The Game Boy Advance was amazing, especially when they came out with the SP. That was a great game. So Ninja 5.0 was this, like, it was this really cool action game that was kind of like a combination between Ninja Gaiden and Bionic Commando. You had like this grappling hook, and you could shoot, and you had to yeah, I mean, just watch this. This is so cool. Look, oh, I remember that level. Yep. And you had like rescue people. You know, these spikes, and like I said, it was all about using your tools. You had your grappling hook, you had your jump, and you had your weapons. It was a really cool game. Really cool game. I think it was only on the Game Boy Advance too. So there you go, you know, you get to see some emulation. I have the other emulation thing that I do see on certain games. There's some games are fine, but some games I do see screen tearing. Sometimes in the middle of the screen you'll see like a little section that'll kind of flicker sometimes, and that is something, one of the Kickstarter updates, they are aware of that, and they're supposedly be coming out with a patch soon. Yeah, see, there's your grappling hook. Yeah, oh man, I remember this. Yeah, you can, again, the moves that you can do in this game are just really rad. Yeah, man, I really got to play this again. Now I want to play this. But you know, so like I said, I can't really play them because I have my, you know, holding my phone, but at least you guys can see. I'll show you a few different consoles. So that's Ninja 5.0. Let's back out. Let's try a different system. I do want to talk about the N64 a little bit because while it seems to emulate it okay, remember the N64 was just a weird controller. You know, it had that three-pronged monstrosity, and for the games that it did well. But the problem is, to try to emulate that, some games work better than others. Like, I tried to do GoldenEye, it emulates it fine, but oh boy, I gotta figure out if there's a different way to control that or to make it work, because the default control system, the default control scheme on that is a frickin' mess. See, there's a controller right there, that three-pronged, I mean, for you youngins out there. That's the N64 controller. You got the D-pad on the left, the analog stick, and then you had this. You only had one analog stick. You had the C buttons instead of the second analog stick. And so, like, oh God, the emulation, like, you would do, what was it, like, the left stick moved side to side, or no, it turned you. The right stick would like stray. I mean, it was just, so I got to see if there is like an alternate, or if I can remap for that game or something, because oh man, GoldenEye was so good. Like, you know, I can play Perfect Dark on the Xbox and it works great, but I'd love to play GoldenEye again. 1080 snowboarding, oh man, I can't tell you how many analog sticks we wrecked in college trying to do 1080s on that game. Let's go in there. I haven't actually launched this. Let's see if let's just watch the intro to this, because it was a cool intro back in the day. Let's watch this. Take a little longer to load. They're bigger ROMs. Nintendo 64, the big cool N. Oh yeah, the Tommy Hilfiger. Oh man, this was so good. Oh, this game was... We played this all the time in college. There was one time, like, a friend of mine and I, we stayed up till 3 in the morning, literally playing this. It was like the track 3, the third track. And we played that, like, just because we were just going back and forth. Between this and Mario Kart 64, oh my god, this and GoldenEye, and Mario Kart 64 was just the college everybody played. And this game was amazing back in the day. I mean, it looked really good. This is the first level, basically. And what was cool is when you did, if you did a really record-breaking run, it would start, the demo footage would start out the same, but then it would actually show your highest scoring run. And my friend and I, we would just go back and forth, like I said, and we were trying to get... I think I pulled off a 1080 once. I was never able to do it. I could sort of semi-regularly do a 900, but, oh, man, yeah, this, oh. Okay, so they're showing some, okay, a couple two-player things going there. Oh, man, yeah, I gotta see how this controls, because I might be able to play this again. Alright, enough of that. Man, hell yeah. F-Zero X, again, I like the Super Nintendo version, but this one was like full 3D. People complain that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like Wipeout where you had the weapons and you had better graphics, but you had, what was it, 30 cars. And for back then, like 30 cars on one track that you were fighting against, and you had loops and tunnels, and let's go into this really quick. Again, we'll just show you a few demo track footages here. I don't even remember how this starts. But I remember playing this on a big screen TV, and like some of my friends actually got, like, this was when big screen TVs were new, or were not really a thing because they were expensive as hell and they were projection TVs. Let's see if it does any I think it might do some demo footage. But like, you could get like motion sick. Like some people got motion sick just by watching these. Yeah. Oh, shut up, voiceover. I don't know where. Oh, because it thinks the character profiles. Ha, that's funny. So you get a little footage. I mean, yeah, it looks plain now, but like I said, and it was 60 frames a second. 30 cars, 60 frames a second. This game was badass. And I still own this game. So, yeah, let's get voiceover to shut up about that. And here, I gotta show you one more N64 game. Yes, this game was so cool. I didn't like it when I first tried it, but then when I tried it again, my friend got into it, my roommate got into it. I fell hard for this game. Tetrasphere. It's like Tetris, but in a full sphere, and they had all kinds of different mission objectives. The Crystal Towers can rot in hell. The Crystal Towers sucked really bad. Oh, just this music. Oh, so many memories from that. You just tell whenever one of us was playing, because you'd hear the N64 start up, and you just hear this, you know, you just hear it, and Tetrasphere. I can play Tetrasphere again. Oh, this game was... I still love Tetris better, but once I got into it, man, this was really fun. And the buttons are a little bit mapped different on the controller, but I can play it. It's actually not too bad. I just got to get used to a few more little changes, but like I was playing this the other day and doing fairly okay for not having played it in like 15 years or 10 years. Tetrasphere. Man, yeah, that game was awesome. Go back. There we go. So a little Tetrasphere for you. So that's, like I said, it emulates fine. Some of the controls are a little bizarre. Let's see. We got some Sega Genesis. I'm not going to go through all the consoles, but you get the idea, especially the older ones. You know, like I said, the newest really that I've played are the N64. I haven't really found much on the PlayStation the games that I've wanted to play, I haven't found. So, you know, like things like Tekken 3, Soul Blade, and the Tony Hawk games. Again, I would kill to play those again. So I haven't done much with that, and I haven't done the Dreamcast. I would have done Shenmue if it weren't for the fact that as I'm recording this, the Shenmue 1 and 2 collection comes out in like 3 days on the PC, so I'm totally pumped about that. So, there's a look at some of the games. I want to talk a little bit about just my thoughts on emulation and the reason this system is kind of a divisive one before we wrap up. Let's go to NES. No, let's do SNES, because I will put it on the track screen of one of my favorite games. I've talked about it on the channel before. Oh, this game is so good. This game is so good. I played it earlier today. Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. And this is a case where the Super Nintendo version was better than the arcade, because it actually had more characters from the show. Like I remember in the Prehistoric Land, they had this blobule thing. I don't even know what it was in the arcade, but then it was Slash. And I think there was a couple more levels in the Super Nintendo version. So anyway, why did I pick this system? Why? Like I said, I've emulated things on the PC before. Why would I kickstart a thing like this? And it's really because, like I said, I work full time. I don't really want to go to some of the shadier parts of the internet. I don't really want to, find a whole bunch of ROMs and things, and I don't want to get viruses and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, with the MAME stuff, you have to have certain ROMs, certain versions of ROMs, certain versions of MAME, and I just don't have the time, nor do I care enough to go through all that process. So if I have just a simple way, I'm not a snob as to, oh, this isn't super perfect. It's not every little pixel or every little something isn't perfect. As long as it's like 95, 98% the way there, I'm okay. I have seen one other video clip of somebody had said this game, like even Super Mario Brothers, which I tested and it was fine. Somebody had said, like, and their video showed it. It was like the footage was the music was pitched down like a whole octave. It was running slower and it looked like garbage. I've never had that problem. I ran a little quick update and everything is updated. I have not experienced that with the DreamCade replay at all. But like I said, that's one of the things I saw from somebody else. But other than those emulator bugs with Mortal Kombat 4 and one or two of the other arcade games, I've had no problem at all. So the thing with, I got this thing because it's like, if I could have something, I love the NES Classic. I love the SNES Classic. But neither of them, I know you can find a way and you can put extra ROMs and stuff in each one of those. I know you can do that. But if I could just have like a one system where, it would, I can just plug in to my TV, sit comfortably, and I can play NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis. I mean, they have the Genesis flashbacks, but most of those I've heard the emulation is terrible. So I haven't bought one of those yet. They have the Atari flashback ones, which I kind of want to get the Activision one, actually. But I just want to have, like I said, just all I got to do is go search for a ROM, it downloads it, and then I go back to the menu and I can play. Once I get through the initial setup, I don't really have to care. The machine, it boots in, like if I have never turned it off yet, but when you turn it off, it'll boot up. You boot into Windows, you boot into the DreamCade software, and you just select any of the ROMs or games you want to play. It's just that easy. Now, so that's why I did it, is because it's just a really streamlined interface. You know, I don't have all day to surf, you know, to look for the ROMs and all that and go mess with everything, set up a Raspberry Pi. I'm sure the Raspberry Pi thing is not that complex, but I just don't really care. Just give me something I can use. I can easily take this with me to a hotel. And on top of that, if I have a little keyboard or something, I have a Windows 10 PC. You know, I could still exit out of this thing, and I could check my email. I could do something on the internet. I could put Steam on here and play indie games, especially if I got more storage put into it. So, you know, I mean, yeah, I already have some computers, but as tiny as this thing is, and it's just like this universal, just, you know, it's kind of just what I need. I really like this sort of setup. So that's why I kind of went this direction. When it comes out for everybody, I think it's going to be $129. I picked it up for $100. I did the pre-order for Kickstarter. When I backed it, it was $100. And $100 for a fully functioning Windows 10 PC, all-in-one, just search, download, and play, multi-console emulator setup. Okay, why not? Sure. That I can hook up to my TV via HDMI. I can live with that. So, finally, I want to talk a little bit about emulation, because I know one of the things that they always say, and even on the warnings, they say, like, you know, you have to own, you know, emulators are not illegal. It's what people do with the ROMs or the game files where you really get into the gray/illegal territory. And here's my thing. I'm all for, like I said, I will go, if the game is available on some modern platform that I can easily play, be it on a computer, on a relatively modern console, handheld, on a phone, whatever, sure, I'll grab it. But the vast majority of these games, especially when you look at the arcade, there aren't arcades anymore. Unless you live in like a really big city or go to certain expos, you can't play arcade games anymore. Be it the classic 70s and 80s ones, or even like the 90s ones. People just don't have access to them. You know, I have a lot of the Nintendo games, and even this game, I own this game. I own all the Mario games. How many times have we been forced, with the Virtual Console, how many times have we been forced to re-download Super Mario Brothers on the Wii, the Wii U, the 3DS, or the DS, the 3DS? You know, God knows it'll probably come to the Switch, and they'll probably make you buy it for another $5 to $8 again. And I don't, like I said, there's only so many times I can do that. Until Nintendo comes up, or until somebody comes up with a universal thing where people can just have royalties or something, and they can just have like a Netflix for games, even if it were by console, like if there was a Nintendo branded one where you had a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, N64, that kind of a thing. Maybe you had a Sega one that would cover Master System through Dreamcast. Microsoft is bringing some of their original Xbox games to backwards compatibility, but a lot of these things, again, you know, you don't want to dig the stuff out of your closet, and you just want to have a way to play them. Or if you don't own the game as it is, there's not a way for people to easily get these games. Half the time people, like, if they want to bring them out to a modern system, they can't, because the licensing is in some kind of development hell limbo where, like, okay, like this game, for instance, you probably got, somebody owns the Turtle license, somebody probably owns the console version of the game, Somebody owns the arcade version of the game license. I don't know. You know, there's sometimes where, like, somebody will own the characters, like let's say the Marvel stuff. Somebody might own the Marvel license, but not the Marvel movie. They can't base it on the movies because that's a totally different type of license. It's just, like I said, it's a clusterfuck. It's terrible. And so, you know, for games like, I mean, Tetrisphere, the only way that the game is ever going to be playable on a modern system is for, I don't even know what the rights are for it, but like if Nintendo does eventually come out with an N64 Classic and they miraculously put it on there, otherwise that game's never coming out to anything again. I do own it, but it's buried in my closet. I don't have room, nor do I want to have 16 game consoles hooked up to my TV. I had a friend of mine, again, a roommate of mine, who did have that for one time, and he loved it for a while, but even then he's just like, no, I can't do this anymore, and he got rid of some of this stuff. But, you know, like I said, as far as some of the stuff I don't own a lot. You know, obviously I don't own the arcade ROMs. I don't own the Punisher. I don't own Berserk for the arcade. I don't own Soul Blade or Soul Edge. But how else am I going to play them? How else am I going to play those? And the answer is, I'm not. I do own the before it was pulled, I own the Xbox 360 version of the Simpsons arcade game, so I don't feel guilty about downloading that one either. But for this older stuff, like some of the stuff in the Atari, I own. Some of it, yeah, I maybe don't. But again, how else are you going to play it? Some of these weird NES or, you know, any of these console games. You look at game preservation. There are people actually bothering to try to, you know, have these museums and ways to preserve the games in their original form, just to preserve game history. You know, you have, because the game media does a terrible job in a lot of ways of, like, there's games where people, they don't even have the source code for the games anymore. So Nintendo's even been guilty of literally putting, I think it was one of their, was it their like Mario Anniversary disc or something? They didn't have access to one of their Mario game ROMs, and so people found out when they looked at the code that it was actually Nintendo themselves went to a ROM site and grabbed one of theirs because they didn't even have the ROM available. So, like I said, even the big companies are guilty of it. So, you know, if these things become available where I can pay to play them, you know, some of the games like in the Saturday Afternoon collection, you know, where you had the DuckTales and stuff like that for NES. Yeah, I own that on Steam. So if I wanted to go grab those, I could. If they make some of these things available in collections and they're emulated well, I'll grab them. You know, if they're emulated terribly, like those Genesis flashback consoles, I'm not going to buy those. But the Xbox 360 Genesis collection, I do own that because it was emulated really well. I own some Sega stuff on Steam. So, yes, I've downloaded some games that I don't necessarily own at least that particular version of. But you know what? You know, like I said, in a way I don't feel guilty about it because there aren't other ways to do it. Should there be a way in the future, I will likely gladly go grab it. But honestly, except for like the arcade stuff, most of the console stuff I do own either through retro collections or through owning the physical cartridge themselves. I just don't want to dig them out of the closet. So a lot of the stuff that I have downloaded, I technically is not illegal because like I said, I own the vast majority of what I've downloaded here. But anyway, that is my thoughts just on emulation in general. I think it's a very useful tool for preserving games, letting people who would never be exposed to them be able to play them, and for those of us who remember them. But these big companies are more interested in microtransactions and doing God knows whatever these days. Then, you know, they're not offering this stuff. That's why I respect things like Good Old Games. Watch the documentary that NoClip did, that they're in the middle of. They did the first episode a couple of weeks ago on how they're resurrecting some of these old PC games, and I think that's phenomenal. I think that's an excellent idea. I would love to see that kind of care come to the different consoles. You know, you see companies like Capcom doing it sort of already with their Mega Man and their Street Fighter collections, but, you know, unless it's a big name, yeah, you'll get the big 20, 30 titles, but you're not going to get, you know, the 400 or 500 games to complete the library. So that's my thoughts on Emulation, and that is my thoughts overall on the DreamCade replay. Oh, I think my controller went to sleep again. Hang on. Wakey, wakey. There we go. So yeah, Super Nintendo, there we go. Yeah, like I said, it's a little Windows PC. It is a multi-emulation box. And for what I want it for, I think it actually does a pretty fantastic job. And I am enjoying it so far quite a bit. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Follow me on Twitter at BGFH79, mixer.com/BGFH, and until next time, I will talk to you guys again later.